So Donal, thank you very much for making time to share your insights into the future of manufacturing. But before we go into the future, can you tell us a little bit about your own background? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Ireland, in a small town called Athlone in the Midlands of Ireland. I spent the first 30 years of my life there. I schooling there and went to third level education in Athlone as well. So I never drifted too far.
And what was your dream career when you grew up?
I don't know if I had one specific dream career, but I remember being very interested in things like geology and archaeology and that kind of learning more about the unknown. So yeah, if that's a good way of describing it, that's probably what excited me when I was young.
And was there a specific era that drew your attention?
I don't think so, no. It was just, I grew up in the countryside outside a town, and I just always loved kind of exploring and trying to learn about what was around me. And I think it was just that as I went through my education, then I became interested in geography and that kind of thing, and just really, I was always drawn towards that. But then later in my high school career, I started getting more into science and physics, and that's when I drifted more towards that and more away from the geology side.
Right, and you started your career as an engineer, I believe, as a development engineer.
I studied polymer science in third level. I got a BSc in polymer science and went on and did a PhD. And yeah, from there, I did my first 8 years or so of my career was in R&D. Firstly, as a kind of a lab technician type role, and then I became a development engineer for a medical device company in Ireland.
And then I believe in 2006, you came out to South Africa. What made you come out to this part of the world?
Yeah, it was a big jump. Look, I'd like to give you some big story as to why I did it, but it was basically just for a change. Myself and my brother, just on a whim, decided, let's get out of here. Let's go. And we decided to see what happened. It wasn't, from the outset, it wasn't necessarily a permanent relocation. That's just the way it turned out for me. But to begin with, we decided to come here and become helicopter pilots. So it really was a drastic change for both of us. And we came out and got our helicopter licenses, but then my brother decided to go, I decided to stay, and I went back to my original science career at that stage.
And I believe you moved to Durban, and today you're in charge of, you're the technical director for Nuvo Rubber.
Yes, like after my couple of years dabbling around with helicopters, at this stage I had met my future wife, who is a lady from Durban, and that's when I decided I was going to try to settle down here. So I started the search for work, and that's when I met with Colin Stroberg, who's the current MD of Nuvo Rubber Compounders. And yeah, he decided to take me under his wing. I had zero experience in rubber. All of my prior experience was on the plastic side of things. And yeah, he said he'd show me the ropes, and I've been there ever since.
And can you tell us a little bit about Nuvo Rubber? What is your position in the market at the moment, and maybe in future?
Yeah, like we're okay. The rubber industry is split kind of in two. You have the tire sector, and then what they call the industrial rubber sector. And the industrial is basically anything that's not a pneumatic tire.
Right.
So Africa, that comprises mostly conveyor belts. That's probably the highest volume. So what we do is we're a rubber compounder. So we manufacture the actual rubber compound that's used by our customers to produce things like conveyor belts. That's our primary role as a company. But then we do manufacture some rubber products ourselves as well. We do solid tires for forklifts. We also do tire retread for trucks. And we do a small amount of a specific type of conveyor belt ourselves as well. But our core is rubber compounding.
Right. And going back to the early stages of your career, and maybe even before your career, who inspired you? Can you tell us who was your, or what was your source of inspiration?
Yeah, look, as a child, it would have to be my grandfather was the person that inspired me most. He was a leader in his own right. He was, at one stage in his life, he was the president of the Gaelic Athletic Association in Ireland, which is the largest sporting organization in Ireland. And he was president of that for a couple of years in the late 60s. But throughout his life, he was inspirational to a lot of people. He founded different organizations to help the youth in Ireland. He wrote books. He was actually a primary school principal as well. So yeah, and a very humble man. And yeah, I always admired him growing up.
And Donal, looking back over your career, what would you say was a major turning point?
Look, definitely, and probably obviously, is the move to South Africa. Coming here and basically starting fresh, and that's what led to my jump from the plastics industry to the rubber industry. And it's a move that I definitely don't regret, and I don't miss the plastics industry, and I absolutely love working in the rubber industry.
And Donal, what is driving you today?
It's got to be my family. I've got my wife and two young girls here. Still have family back home, my parents and siblings. And yeah, look, I just want my family to be proud of me, and I want my family here to be well provided for, and that's what drives me to succeed.
Now, looking into the future of manufacturing, Donal, how do you see the future of manufacturing or manufacturing in South Africa change in the years to come?
Yeah, it's a difficult question now, I think, in light of what's happened in the past couple of months.
Yeah.
If you asked me that question 3 months ago, I probably would have given a different answer to the answer I'll give now. But look, there's two ways it can go. There's the way I would like it to go, and there's the way that it probably will go. And the way that it probably will go is back to normal. But the way I would like it to go would be for the manufacturing industry to go through a drastic change. What has really crippled the industry here over the past few years is the indecisiveness of the government and the lack of clarity in their policies, basically, especially when it comes to Black economic empowerment and nationalization of mines and that kind of thing. And it's created turmoil in the manufacturing sector, especially in our manufacturing sector, because we're heavily reliant on the mining industry. And those gray areas have become, they've basically become a kind of a rotten apple within the industry, and nobody's willing to grow it. And that's a big problem. So I would like to see the government focus more on genuinely growing the industry. The manufacturing industry in South Africa has huge potential for creating employment. And that's what the government should be focusing on, and not so much who's at the heads of these companies, but rather employing people on the ground and getting employment down from the 30 to 40% that it's currently sitting at.
Right.
That's where I would like to go.
And Donal, looking back over your own leadership journey, what is it that you've learned that you considered most important for building future manufacturing leaders?
Basically, never to resist learning. It's something that I've always tried to live by, is to learn as much as possible. And even now during lockdown, I've been reading and learning, and I'll never know it all. I think anybody who proclaims to know it all should retire because I think learning is what we all need to do on an ongoing basis. Yeah, and learn from the people around you. Be flexible. You know, don't pigeonhole yourself into one specific field. Always look to spread your wings.
Right. And Donal, what are the biggest challenges you have encountered in your manufacturing career and that you would advise or caution future manufacturing leaders about that they could expect in their own career?
Yeah, look, me personally, definitely the transition from plastics to rubber was a huge challenge for me. While rubber does share a similar background to and basis as plastics, but there's a huge amount, an enormous amount of differences, and that was my biggest challenge, was to basically start from scratch and learn a completely new field. But also, I think the changing culture from Ireland to South Africa, professional culture. I mean, there's a complete gulf in the difference between the manufacturing industry in Ireland and the manufacturing industry in South Africa, and that took a lot of getting used to for me. Probably one of the biggest challenges that I face now in recent years within the rubber industry here is the resistance to change of the industry as a whole and individuals within the industry. And I find that is definitely a barrier to progress here. And it's something that people need to drop, is that resistance. And especially, I think that's now more important than ever, is that people become open to change to make sure we survive here in South Africa.
Right. Now, Donal, if you were to design a curriculum for future manufacturing leaders, what are the new skills that you would like to factor in?
Yeah, one thing that I think people don't do enough of is listening. And throughout my undergraduate curriculum and even my postgraduate, it's not something that I ever heard mentioned. But I think listening without bias, and I think they call it mindful listening, is a huge skill that anybody who aspires to be a leader has to have. If you can't listen to those around you and really listen, not just sit there and pretend you're listening and your mind wanders and you start thinking critically about what the person is saying. You need to really listen with open ears and without bias. And it's amazing what that can do, because it feeds back into what I was saying about never resist to learning. You can always learn from people. And you'll only do that if you listen to them. So that's something that should be taught more, because it's a rare skill, and I'm still trying to master it myself.
And Donal, what is your advice for future manufacturing leaders when it comes to social media? How should they handle social media and navigate social media to build their own leadership brand?
Yeah, I think it's obviously, again, it's an ever-changing branch of media. So what I say now might change in a few weeks.
Yeah.
That's how dynamic it is. But look, I think the important thing for people, and it's going to become more and more important as the years go on, is the obvious one is to think before you post. People tend to post things about their careers or their opinions on certain aspects of their industry without really thinking about it, and without really thinking about the damage that it can do to their own personal brand and their brand as a leader within their industry. So I think that's one thing that people really need to learn is to just be much more mindful about what people will think of you when you post. And then, yeah, just to try and give back. Like, don't always let it be about you or your company, but I think the more people post about general business or general industry, and try to help others, I think that will do wonders for a person's brand. If people can see that they are genuinely interested in helping the people around them.
Right. Now, Donald, you touched on the current situation around COVID-19. How do you believe this will change the local manufacturing industry?
Yeah, local. Again, in South Africa, what I hope will happen is that I think we need to see a more nationalistic approach to business. It goes against where everybody has been going in recent years, globalization. But I think that's going to be the key to survival now in South Africa, is that we start supporting local industry. And in our particular case, being a manufacturer, we need to start supporting local suppliers. And I think that's going to be the key, because everybody is going to suffer now. And if we just go back to the norm of importing and the globalization type approach, we're going to watch people dropping like flies around us.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's the key. We have to become nationalistic. We need to support local industry as much as possible.
And Donald, as a mentor to future leaders, can you maybe share a success story or two where you mentored an upcoming leader and that person took your advice to heart?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. Yeah, look, I did quite a bit of mentoring when I was in Ireland, but unfortunately, I left before I got to see firsthand the fruits of my mentoring.
Yeah.
I know, look, through LinkedIn and through contact with some of the guys that I did mentor, they have gone on to become quite successful. Here in South Africa, in recent years, I have taken a couple of not undergraduates, but new graduates from local universities into our laboratory facilities at Nuvo Rubber. And I've enjoyed that. It's basically they come in on a learnership, a 1-year learnership, and we teach them as much as possible, and then they move on into the industry. And yeah, I had one guy a couple of years ago that I really clicked with, and told him as much as I could squeeze in within the year. And it was good, like, because he came in with an open mind. He wanted to learn. He was very eager. And that's what I like to see. And that's how people need to be, is eager to learn and hungry for knowledge. And this guy really was, and he learned well, and I taught him as much as possible, and he moved on, and he's now growing in the polymer industry in South Africa, and hopefully a future leader.
Right. And Donald, are there any role models of leadership that you would recommend future manufacturing leaders should study and maybe learn from?
Yeah, look, I think I wouldn't say overused, but a well-used one here in South Africa, of course, is Nelson Mandela. I think he's an inspiration to us all, not specifically manufacturing, but just as a humble leader. I think he's a role model we should all use. I also admire Steve Jobs, how he progressed and how he took on the role of leading Apple. Mostly because his delegating skills. He surrounded himself by his A players, and he wasn't afraid to admit when he didn't know exactly what to do, but he had guys in his team who knew what to do. And I think that's the key for any leader is to realize that you are not going to do it all yourself, and you need to surround yourself by future leaders, and you need to take those people in and guide them along and be there to support them when they need it. I think Steve Jobs was a master at doing that.
Well, Donal, how can our listeners connect with you, and where should they follow you?
I'm on LinkedIn, and that's probably the best place to connect with me. Our company does have a website, nuvorubber.com. We do publish quarterly newsletters on that website. But probably LinkedIn to connect with me directly. LinkedIn is the best place.
Right. And last but not least, Donal, is there one piece of advice that you would really like to convey to future manufacturing leaders that they should implement in their own leadership and maybe in their own life?
Yeah, I think it's one that I've mentioned probably a few times in this chat, but it's never stop learning. I think it's what I live by, and I think it's what any good leader needs to abide by is to never stop and listen to those around them, and don't be afraid to admit that you don't know everything.
Right. Well, Donal, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your nuggets of wisdom so generously, and helping us to hopefully build a better future.
Yeah, thanks very much, Dr. Nick. It was good to chat, and I hope some people can take something from what I said, and let's hope the future for South African manufacturing industry is bright.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.